Okay, good morning, everyone. We are going to get started. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Stephen Gitsoyan, and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni and Family Relations here at California Lutheran University. I wanted to go over just a few housekeeping items before we get started with the presentation. If you have any questions during this session, please use the chat box located in the Zoom menu, and we will be answering questions during the dedicated Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. Secondly, when you joined the meeting, your video was off and your microphone was muted. Please do not change these settings during the presentation to help us avoid any excess noise or disruptions. Finally, this presentation is being recorded and it will be posted on our website for you to reference later this afternoon. Now with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this morning's presentation. Dr. Stacy Thayer is a PhD in organizational psychology and currently works as an organizational consultant specializing in information technology, cybersecurity, and remote teams. She's completing her EMBA at California Lutheran University in May of 2020. Congratulations, Dr. Thayer, and teaching cybersecurity for undergraduates at CLU in fall 2020. So with that, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Stacy Thayer.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I hope everybody is doing well. So today what I'm going to be talking about is effective management of remote teams. As everybody knows, a lot of people have been quickly moved and shuffled into working remotely and having to manage remote teams. And so I've been working with remote teams and teaching cyber psychology and working within the realm of how do you manage what you can't see when somebody's not right in front of you, when you're talking to somebody through a computer and communicating online. So how do you effectively manage those remote teams? So today I'm going to be talking to you about the following things. So next slide. So the structure of this talk, so first we'll set the stage and just talk about, so get on the same page of what about management and employee engagement, then go into what's unique about managing remote teams and the dynamics of online communication, and then how you can create trust and engagement with those remote employees, which is so essential to the relationship between managers and employees, and then do summary and key takeaways from this talk. So setting the stage for management employee engagement, which is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Many of you who are managers have probably heard of employee engagement, gone over what makes a good manager. So we're going to just quickly review that to get on the same page and set the stage for moving forward with how do we translate that to remote management. So again, what makes a good manager? What the current research tells us. And so it's looking at each of your employees, looking at their individuality, looking at the uniqueness of them. What are their individual contributions? What's the role that they play in your team, both as an individual and then how they come together? And then helping your team understand how they contribute together, how they come together, and to appreciate each other. Looking at your employees' strengths and weaknesses, and then providing the growth and support for those weaknesses. That you're communicating with your employees, you're listening to them, you're giving them support, and you're creating, as I'll talk about later, that trust and then psychological safety, which is something that I'll get into on a deeper dive later if that's a term that you're not familiar with. And then that you as a manager are consistent and reliable in your expectations and your feedback. So this is all things that you may have heard about or read about. This isn't reinventing the wheel about what makes a good manager. We want to take the skills that you have already learned about as a manager and learning how to translate that into a remote environment. Same thing with employee engagement. As a manager, as a leader, you're likely familiar with what employee engagement is and the fact that it's something that we want to strive to have with our employees. We know that engaged employees, they're higher performers, they tend to stay longer at organizations, and they're all over something that we want to try and have with our employees. So the research shows us that the key factors in getting employee engagement is when we offer a lot of management support. They have good relationships with their managers. They know what their goals are. They're able to express themselves and they're able to bring themselves into their work and have opinions about their work. They're not just following instructions and they're invested in their work and the output. They feel that they can contribute. They're making a difference to the organization. They're getting recognition. They feel that they matter. And that they have a mental challenge, that what they're doing is engaging their brain. They're thinking about things. And that these are all the things that really cause somebody to be engaged and invested in their work. So again, these are all things, we're not reinventing the wheel. But what we are doing is looking at what is unique about remote teams and online communication, so we can take what we already know about management, leadership, and employee engagement and translate that into the remote teams that many of you have suddenly been thrust into these management positions. So one of the first things that we want to look at when we look at online communication is just communication in general. And one of the things that I like to teach, and I bring this up in my cyber psychology class because it's always interesting to see, but is Moravian's rule of 738-55 rule of communication. And this goes for online and offline communication. And what this essentially says is that when we communicate, we're actually only taking in 7% of what somebody says. Everything else, we're looking at tone of voice and facial expressions. So most of the time when we're face to face with somebody, our brain is looking at everything except what we're actually hearing and listening to the words that we're saying. We're thinking of a lot of other stuff that we're taking in both subconsciously. Now, when you remove all that, so you're writing an email, you're looking at something on your computer screen, you're now taking away 93% of the way that our brains process communication. That's a lot of communication processing that we're now missing. So what does this do to this rule and this model that has been kind of the groundwork for communication models? How do we compensate for that? So how do we compensate for that in a remote environment when all we have are words? So we have to compensate around that. We have to effectively pad the words with cues. So we have to compensate for these lack of visual or audio cues. We need to over communicate in some ways. If you've ever had somebody that over communicates with emojis sometimes, this is why emojis even exist. Though we don't want to over communicate with those, we say, but we can use our words to communicate what we're trying to say. And we can be honest in those communications. In fact, there's even services, Grammarly is one, they'll review your emails and they'll actually give you feedback about the tone. So if you're ever wondering what is your communication style, you can actually submit some of your emails and it will give you feedback on this is what your tone of voice is in your communication. Because if you've ever sent an email and what happens is somebody reads it and they read it with their tone of voice in their head. And that can lead to a lot of miscommunications. So sometimes you want to say, this is the intent of this email. I want you to understand this is where I'm coming from. And if you want to soften your words or use harder words, you do want to communicate that intent. You want to have multiple communication touch points. This is a way of, if you're talking throughout multiple points of the day, it's giving multiple data points. If you only have one communication point in the day and it's a very short, abrupt email, then you're really limiting your communication touch points and putting all of that data into one single email. Versus if there's several communication touch points, and then you can start having more, one kind of those one-word emails because you've got more data points to say, okay, we've got now the rhythm of what our communication touch points are. When you work with your employees, both as an individual and a team, and I'm going to say this over and over again, you're setting your clear expectations and you're making sure that you're on the same page as to why these expectations exist. So you're overcompensating for the lack of facial cues and the lack of tone of voice by explicitly learning each other and consciously learning each other. And that means communicating about that. So I'm going to be asking you, hey, what time are you going to be taking your lunch break? And I'm asking you that because I have somebody that I need to be answering to. So when I say, hey, what time are you taking your lunch break? I'm not doing that because I'm micromanaging you. I'm doing it and I'm annoyed with you because I don't know where you are. I'm doing this because I actually have to know because somebody else needs to know this information. And then come back to that trust and psychological safety. When you're building that relationship and over time as you establish trust, employees feel that they can come to you to ask for clarification and to share those ideas and thoughts. And you begin to build that relationship of trust where you understand the context behind just the words. And then above all, if you're unsure, if you get this email and you're thinking, ooh, that was a little abrupt. Are they upset? I don't understand the tone. Is this relationship now in jeopardy? Pick up the phone, schedule that video chat. This is now one of the great things about Zoom, about video conferencing that has now become so widespread, because we can also now have those facial cues. We can have those tone of voices. But sometimes as I'll get into this when we talk about some of the tools, if you're using chat or an email, we sometimes forget to do that and we get busy. And so we send those abrupt emails, forgetting that maybe your remote employee on the other end, who is in their own little bubble, maybe feeling out of touch, feels that a little bit differently. And so do those multiple touch points to make sure that they are feeling engaged and that you do have a good and positive relationship. So building that trust and psychological safety together. So again, with the resources and tools for those multiple communication touch points, video chat, having that resource, have an instant message chat with multiple channels. So when you're having your remote teams, it can get really confusing if you have one chat. So like, for example, if you're using Slack or Discord, you can make different chat rooms to keep things organized. So make sure that when you're using your messaging chat, you keep them organized into different topics, but also include one channel that's for fun and personal interactions. Because when you have remote employees, you do want to have that water cooler talk. You do want to have that place where people can have fun. They can share funny memes or pictures or cartoons or whatever that can help build that camaraderie. It is so important that when you're having the remote teams with people that can be all around the world, you need those touch points. You need those relationships. And when you're doing it remotely, they can't just peep over the cubicle wall and start talking. So you have to sort of create that. So I definitely encourage having a channel that's for fun and personal interactions. And it may take you as the manager breaking the ice on that. You want to have a centralized database, just making sure for tracking work and keeping the resources when this is all over. And you may find that you have employees that are remote and local. You want to keep those consistent. So you don't silo between remote and local employees. You want to keep a level playing ground so that you don't silo the remote from the local, so that people who are remote are feeling left out. That's one fast track to disengaged remote employees when they feel like they're left out of the organization. And then make sure, as the side note that's important, is make sure that your remote employees are aware of security best practices. And rely on your IT teams. Find out to make sure what are the best practices, what's your organization using. And because the most frustrating thing is somebody who's working remote and doesn't know how to use the technology. So I also encourage you to make sure that you as the manager are familiar with how to use the technologies, that you're working closely with your IT teams or whoever's in charge of determining what technology is going to be available for your remote teams, so that you can help your remote employees and that you can work closely with IT to make sure that your remote teams, because if they can't manage the technology, then they can't do the work. So that's one of the important things, is to make sure that everybody is comfortable with the resources and the tools. Okay, so now to the meat of things, which is how do we create trust and engagement with remote employees? This is something that is very tricky right now, because we were very much thrust into this role of now people are working from home and you can't see them. We don't know what's going on. And people that may not have wanted to work from home are now having to work from home. They've never done it before. And managers who have never managed remote employees don't know how to do this. And suddenly we're being asked to trust what we can't see. We don't know what our employees are doing in a way that you can take a quick walk around the office and see, okay, they're at their cubicle, great. And in 5 minutes, you can see if anybody needs anything, what's going on. That is much harder to do remotely. So you're being asked to trust. And so When I talk about trust and psychological safety, there's a lot of research out there that talks about the importance of this. And this is and these are factors that are important in any relationship, whether it's personal or professional, in office, out of office, from the CEO, top down, bottom up. And all the research shows that employees are much more likely to experience psychological safety. And in the environment of psychological safety, this means that they are able to feel safe, that they can be themselves, they can offer suggestions. So if you're with somebody and you see something, you think, I would like to make this suggestion, you feel that you can make this suggestion without judgment, without feeling like your idea is going to be shot down or you're going to be judged. You feel that you can offer guidance or give feedback without any of that fear or rejection. When you feel that you can bring yourself into your work, you're much more likely to be engaged versus if you're afraid to or you don't feel. If you've ever worked with somebody where every time you bring up an idea, it's just shut down, you shut down. You don't bring yourself into it, just why should I bother? And you begin to shut down and disengage. So for managers, you want to be somebody that your employees feel that they can talk to. Even if they come with you with an idea that sounds like in your head, you're going, oh boy, that idea it wouldn't work. You still you listen to it and explain, okay, well here's maybe some of the reasons why it wouldn't work. But it's a conversation and it's filled with respect. And the more that they build that trust, it can increase productivity, morale, team building, engagement, and all of the stuff that seems like common sense. But so many times, as all the research shows, it's so severely lacking that employee engagement is this sought after and elusive item that people are always trying to find, and we're always trying to find out how we can better engage our employees. And time again, it comes down to trust and psychological safety between managers and employees. So looking at remote work. So the first question that we like to ask is it for everyone? Who might struggle with this? And especially right now, there are people who are working remotely right now who are going crazy. And a lot of times these are extroverts, to people that need to be around other people, that are fueled by other people. They really enjoy that office environment, and it's very hard for them to be at home. Employees with families and distractions. You've got kids, if you've got spouses, you've got an environment where it's very difficult to work. That can be very hard to work remotely. People like to get out, they like to go to the office. High maintenance or hands-on employees. High maintenance and hands-on is not, I don't mean that in a bad way. These just are people that are very hands-on. They learn through interaction. They learn through teamwork. They like to be able to walk into your office and say, can you show me this? I need you to show me and kind of walk me through how it's done. I like to sit down next to somebody. So these are people who really need that interaction and would struggle with remote work and are probably struggling right now. And then there are people who are flourishing. These are employees who might need quiet work. As said, I do a lot of work with IT and technology teams. People who write code, they often flourish with remote work because they can just focus in a quiet, non-distractible environment for hours and time. Employees who work outside 9 to 5. An engaged employee, oftentimes it's about best fit. Some people work better at night. There's books and research coming out that showing 9 to 5 is not necessarily the prime working time for everybody. There are some people that work better at night, in the early morning. So sometimes when employees can set their own hours, if they're self-motivating, then they can actually produce work that is then able to be more effective and they're better contributors. Now, again, not every job is set up and designed for that. Obviously, say if you're in sales or you're working with teams that require consistent hours, then remote employment outside of 9 to 5 may look different. But there's different circumstances, and we're always trying to find the best fit that can really enhance somebody's performance, both for themselves and the team. And so we're trying different things to figure out what can enhance performance, because at the end of the day, the goal is to find out what's the best result. How do we get the best results for our employees, for our company, and what ultimately leads to success, because success is what we're looking for everybody. And one of the best things about remote work is that it opens up to talent that's not local. So for people who have tried to recruit or find talent that is local and you're looking for a very specific position, and for people who do recruiting, it can take sometimes years to find the right position. But when you can open that up, if you're open to somebody working remotely and you can give them the resources, you're opening up your pool to possibly find somebody that might be a better fit. And then what I say is when you're looking at your employees, as I said earlier, you want to look at each employee as an individual. And so you as a manager, when you're asking, what about my remote employees? So are they flourishing? Are they not? How would I know? And what do I need to know? What should I be asking myself about each of my remote employees? As I'm looking at my teams, especially my teams now that have been suddenly put in the position of being a remote employee, what should I know about them? Where do I start? And so these are some questions that I would say to start with in asking yourself as you look at each of your employees. So are they enjoying it? What are the challenges they are facing? How are they handling it? Are they doing their time management? Are they struggling? Are they going crazy? Are they missing people? Are they being motivated? Do they feel they're being productive? Do they feel like they're being in touch with their team and with you? That's an important question, especially if in a normal time, you're managing both remote and in-office teams. If you have a remote employee, especially if maybe you only have one or two, making sure that you do check in with them to say, are you feeling like you're part of the team? Do you feel like you're in a bubble? Because you do want to make sure that they don't feel outside the team, that they do feel they're not experiencing fear of missing out, or FOMO, which you might have heard of. Is there anything that they would have be different? And is there anything that you can do for them? So building that relationship, making sure that they are engaged and listening to them. Are these things, do you know these things about your employees? And then what are the warning signs? So as you look at your employees both now, and if you've worked with remote employees before, or if you think you may do have remote employees in the future, what do the warning signs look like when maybe it's not working out? Maybe they're not quite comfortable or struggling with remote employment. And so not being able to follow through with the agreed upon rules of engagement. This is an important one, and why I keep saying that. It's very important when you're trying to agree on the rules of engagement. So what this might look like, for example, is you have a remote employee and you say, okay, why don't we do a check-in at 10 a.m. and how long do you think you might need for a check-in? Do you think 10 minutes is enough? Do you think 30 minutes is enough? Here are the things that I would like to accomplish. What would you like to accomplish? Okay, it sounds like then we need 30 minutes. Does that sound good to you? Great, okay, then these are all the things we agree on 30 minutes. And 10 o'clock comes and they're not there. Okay, we agreed, we agreed on this, 10 o'clock. Oh, I decided something came up, the landscapers were here and I had to go out and talk to them, and then I came back and, well, we agreed at 10 o'clock. And when you can come to an agreement together, then you're both on the same page. The more that you can be on the same page and you've made these agreements together, there's no room for misunderstanding. If you've made the agreement together, so if you step out for lunch, you're going to let me know, you're going to put in that message chat, hey team, I'm stepping out for lunch at 12 o'clock, I'll be back at 1 o'clock. And you're going to tell me this because if my boss tells me or asks me, where is Joe? I need to be able to know where Joe is. So again, Joe, just let me know, because if anybody asks, I have to let them know. That's why I'm asking, not because I don't trust you, not because I want to micromanage, just somebody is asking me, so I just have to know. So can we agree to that? Great, we agree to that. And then they don't do it. Well, now they're not following through. Now it's a problem. You don't hear from them. So those check-ins, you agreed on 30 minutes, but the communication is abrupt. It's nothing to say, or they're missing their check-ins. You're looking at, you have these shared chat rooms, but nothing is being said. The communication isn't there. Or maybe you're hearing from them too much. There's constant emails. Can you walk me through this? I need this. So when I talked about those high maintenance or the need for interaction employees, They may need to be in an office environment where they can go and sit down with somebody. Everybody has a different learning style. And for some people, their learning style, they do need somebody right there with them, engaging with them and showing them how to do it and walking them through that. And those people may not flourish in a remote environment. And these are things that we want to be looking at to see if this is a good environment for them, or is this a good fit? It's always a good question is this a good fit? Is the work sloppy or not completed? Employees sound anxious or unsure about their work or their role. This is a big warning sign for people that are maybe the one or two people who are working remotely where other people are in the office, that fear of missing out. They sound anxious if they're missing out on something, if everybody else in the team is getting together and they're not able to. They're making lots of excuses. Oh, I couldn't come to the meeting because something was going on. Somebody was at the door. I had to run some errands. There's lots of excuses. They're bickering with or pointing fingers at team members. This happened. I couldn't get it done because they didn't check in. I didn't get this email from somebody. So these are all warning signs that something's not going right. We're not reinventing the wheel. A lot of these things I'm mentioning, these would be warning signs for in-office teams too. But I'm talking about how these translate into your remote teams as well. So you may see that they're very similar, but we want to look at them for the remote teams for right now. But I also want you to think about, what are your own warning signs? Because a lot of you have been thrust into these new roles as remote managers. So how are you doing? Because you want to do self-check-ins too. One of the things that I was told, and I always like it, is that airplane rule. If you have to put your own mask on before you can help someone else. So you want to do self-check-ins too. What are your warning signs as a remote manager so you can make sure that you're doing okay? How are your concerns about being able to trust your remote employees? Do you constantly need to feel that you have to check in? Do you doubt their reliability? Do you feel the urge to micromanage? So if trust and psychological safety is so important, do you feel that you are capable of offering that trust and psychological safety? Because you have to, I encourage you to kind of do a little self-introspection there and say, Anna, am I able to offer that? Do I trust them? Am I at a point where I can offer that in this relationship? And if not, why? What do I have to do to get to this point where I can trust my employees? Are you unable to complete your own work because you're constantly checking on your remote employees? With managers, you're in a tough spot a lot of times, because not only are you managing other employees, you also have your own work to do. And that's a balancing act. I call it walking the tightrope, because you're managing everybody else, and then you're also trying to do your own work. And how are you managing and how are you balancing on that tightrope? Are you able to balance? And if the balance is off, why? What's going on? And to talk, to kind of have that assessment of yourself to figure out, okay, where's my balance and how do I get that? Or are you not checking in with your remote employees enough? Have you dropped the ball on, oh, geez, I just realized I haven't really even checked in with this person enough. Maybe you're too overwhelmed. Maybe you're too busy with your work or with a particular employee that you realize, oh, I haven't checked in with my remote employees enough. And that's a note to yourself to, again, rebalance and make sure that you are checking in with your remote employees, that you are making sure that you're engaging them. And for employees in distress, both for you and both for your employees, have your resources available, internal and external. And create an environment where your employees have someone to talk to and invite them to talk to that person. Now, not every manager is that, say, maybe that touchy-feely person. Not every manager is the person that wants to have that open door policy. And that's okay, but there are other resources that you can make available. So you can have HR, you can have resources that are in your company where if you have an employee in distress, if you don't want to be the person they come to, okay, know your limitations, that's fine, but give them the resources. So if they are struggling at home, if there is something that's going on, that they have their resources. There's a lot going on in the world, especially right now. We don't know what's going on for people at home. We want to make sure that people know what their resources are for their organization, for their home life, for anything. So for internal resources, external resources, we want to make sure that people are getting the support that they need. And we want to make sure that they know that you are trustworthy and honest, that if they do come to you, you are somebody that they can confide in, that you will give them the right resources. Don't let them fall off the map. If you haven't heard from somebody in a while, check on them. Okay, and this is especially true for remote employees because they can fall off the map because we don't necessarily see them. And listen to your gut. If you think something, maybe so you haven't heard from someone in a while, you're worried about them, it's okay, check in on them. It doesn't have to cross the line of personal, just, hey, is everything going okay? Can we just schedule a Zoom call? I just want to check in, catch up, see how things are going. So again, as I said, so knowing your resources, talk to your HR department, communicate those resources to your staff, feel comfortable, let them know that you're available to them. If not, find someone who is, get to know your employees. And that goes back, when I say get to know your employees, that goes back to those questions that I referred to earlier. Just to have those in your head. Do I know these about my employee? Do I know what they're working with right now? And don't mean crossing the line in terms of you have to get to know them personally and know their favorite drinks. What do they have for lunch? But just know, okay, are they doing okay? Do I know, are they able to stay motivated? Are they okay with the way that the team is functioning right now? Are they able to work within their current environment? Is there anything that they would have to do differently? Do they feel like we have a positive relationship? Do they feel like they can come to me as a manager? Get to know where their mental state is. Are they comfortable working remotely? Are they going crazy? Is there anything that I can help them do to keep from going crazy or connect? Is there anything that I can do to help them connect to people? Try to see each one as an individual and get to know them, talk to them. So even if they seem reluctant, to start small, be patient. And do the scheduled check-in, both for the tasks and the big picture, and especially now. So your roadmap for success, my tips and techniques, it's setting those clear and consistent criteria and matching expectations together. So as a team, both as individuals, you and your employees, and then also as a team together, your daily check-ins. So agreeing on the time. So not just you saying, we're going to check in at 10 o'clock and that's it, but we're going to check in at 10 o'clock. Does that work for you? Okay, this is the time. It's how long it's going to be for these reasons. Your key milestones and deadlines, your hours of availability, maybe their hours of availability, the required and available resources, interactions with other employees. What does success look like? So we want to give them the vision, because especially now when things have been thrust into and just all been thrown up in the air, we're trying to figure out where they all land. We're still trying to give an idea of what does everything look like right now. And that's hard right now. It is. But the more that we as managers and leaders can have a vision and communicate that to other people, and to communicate why too. It's one of the things that the research consistently says is when engaging employees, when you communicate why something happens and help them understand their role within the organization and the impact of their work on others. That is one of the top things to engaging an employee, and especially a remote one, who may not understand their role in the organization because they never may see the whole organization. They may never step foot in the office and see how the office works. Understanding their role as the gear in kind of the whole machine really helps them understand the consequences of their actions. So if they don't perform their duties, this is what happens. This is the domino effect. Because it becomes so easy to isolate. It becomes so easy to forget how your actions impact other people, especially when you're sort of isolated in your home office, your home environment, and you may not talk to or engage with other teams. I mean, remote employees, when we talk about silo effects, even just in regular organizations, remote teams may not have an opportunity to interact with other teams. Company meetings it's harder to create those cross-team dynamics with remote employees. That's a whole other talk. So we really want to communicate the way that their role in the organization, but the why. This helps also avoid the micromanaging. It helps them understand where you're coming from, why you're checking in with them, why you're doing some of the things that they do. And it helps establish trust. And again, make sure that the employees understand how to use the available technology. That is definitely the first step, because if you can't use the technology, that can even set the stage for everything else. So again, in summary, draw on your existing strengths as a manager. Don't reinvent the wheel. You are managers. You do rely on what you know. You're just translating that. Look at your employees as the individuals and their approach to remote employment. Some may be flourishing. Some may be struggling. When communicating online, compensate. If there's lack of facial and audio cues, communicate context, intent, and adapt to your recipient. And build trust by establishing routines, expectations, the rules of engagement, and then keep your virtual door open. You're still there. You can still connect. It just looks a little bit different right now.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Thayer, for that presentation. I think some wonderful insights into kind of our remote working world right now, and some useful strategies for remote managers and teams. At this point, I want to open it up to questions. As a reminder, if you have any questions for Dr. Thayer, please put them in the chat box that's located in the Zoom menu. We did have a question come in during your presentation about communication and kind of dealing with Zoom fatigue. So the question is, how do we communicate knowing that most of our communication is coming through these kind of virtual visual mediums while also dealing with Zoom fatigue?
Mm-hmm. So Zoom fatigue, yes, it's becoming a very, very real thing. And well, much like meeting fatigue and death by meetings. And I think what you want to do is start looking at, how often are you having Zoom meetings? How many do you have to have? Can they start to be condensed? And much like when you look at meetings, what are you getting accomplished in those meetings, in those interactions? Can they be shortened? Can they be in chat rooms? Are there other interactions that you can be? Are there other ways in communication touch points where what you're accomplishing in Zoom can be accomplished in a different medium? So I would say to look at what's being accomplished, look at the need for Zoom, and see if there's maybe a different way that you can be accomplishing it. You do want to use Zoom, you definitely do, but could it also be, if it's with your manager, could it also be a phone call, just to even change things up? If it's with a group, you need the group, then you could do just the Zoom. And so just to kind of change things up, because you don't want to have Zoom fatigue, you do want to change things up. So try and see what's being accomplished and condense to be more effective in your Zoom meetings.
That's great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question about kind of the rules of engagement and kind of reevaluating. Like, how often do you think it's important to kind of revisit those established rules, kind of as we're setting into our roles and our remote work? I think more of that remote trust is being built and things are changing daily or weekly. How often should we be revisiting those rules and establishing, maybe daily check-ins are too much, maybe it's every other day or weekly? Any suggestions or comments on that?
Mm-hmm. I think it's something that you need to establish. This is when I said, look at each employee and something to decide with your employees. So it may be different. Some people want to do daily check-ins, and it depends on the work that's being done. For some, it's every other day. So when I say to look at each employee and talk to each employee and say, all right, what do you think is work? Do we want to do daily check-ins? This is why. Yes, okay, then we want to do daily check-ins, but they'll just be 5 minutes each. And so look at what you're trying to accomplish. So start with the goals and walk backwards from the goals. But I would say too, in this time, look at weekly at what's working. And so as a manager, to look at your employees and at least as a manager, once a week, do a check-in sort of with yourself on your employees and ask yourself, is this working? So even if you have a list of all your different employees, so let's say you have 5 employees and you've got a list of their names, say, okay, do I feel like this worked? Yes. Do I feel like everything's going okay here? And then ask them, do you feel like what we did this week worked? Do you feel like that check-in was okay? And this is the communication part and the honesty and the working on it together, is asking them, do you feel like you needed more? Do you feel like that we're checking in too much? And work together on it as a team. So maybe you start with daily check-ins, but you find that it's starting to feel like death by meeting. So, okay, let's take it to every other day then. And that sort of leads to what I was talking about with the Zoom fatigue, is if it's starting to feel like check-in fatigue or starting to feel like Zoom fatigue, well, then maybe it is too much. And we look at, okay, then how can we condense it and make it so we meet less? But, it really is going to be trial and error. And I wish I had a magic solution for it, but it's so case by case and situation and person by person, that as a manager, you're really looking at it and problem solving it with the individual, with the situation, and doing trial and error to see what works. What I think is important is to make sure that you're working on that solution with your employees to try and find the sweet spot, because I think you will find the sweet spot where we go, okay, great. And most importantly, you'll find the sweet spot in the relationship, because once you find that sweet spot in the relationship where you can talk about it and have that trust to say, this is what I need right now, that's when it's going to get easier.
Great, thank you. So a question about learning new tools. So as this pandemic has obviously increased anxiety for most people, that's making learning new things challenging. Do you have any tips for managers on what they can do to help employees learn new tools for remote work under these conditions?
Yeah. A lot of patience. There again, it's going to just be a lot of patience, a lot of understanding. You want to bring people up to speed so quickly. I would encourage, what are the roadblocks that are in place? Is it the distractions? What's the problem that we're trying to solve? Is it that they just don't want to learn? Is it the distractions? What is getting in the way? So I tend to take on a very customized approach to things. So in learning something, what's getting in the way? Okay, so it is the anxiety. All right, so what can we do to manage the anxiety? What is in the way? Can we get somebody, do you have an IT system in place? Is there an instructional video? What are the resources that are available? Does the vendor have options that are available? As I understand it, that a lot of like Zoom has stepped up in their training videos and their security, that a lot of the vendors are trying now, and hopefully this will come out sooner rather than later, to make simpler instructions to address some of these issues, to make things easier and less frustrating to understand. Because it's hard to learn anything, as many of the students are trying to get through the last semester, trying to learn and apply any kind of knowledge is very, very frustrating right now. And so having that patience and trying to come up with those solutions is a challenge. So I'd encourage them to work with the vendors and to try and keep finding new ways of encouraging that information and trying to figure out why that information either isn't going through, or can they do either so it depends. I'm trying to think of the different services that are out there. So like Slack will do, there's some training videos on Slack. So I would encourage some of the training videos. I would see if you could get some of the support people that are out there to do, sometimes they'll do some of the hands-on or walkthrough trainings. So go to the resources, like I said, that are offered by the different vendors, and see if you can get them maybe to do a walkthrough. And then for you as the manager, in addition to looking for the different resources, to have patience and encouragement and see what your workarounds will be, and to talk to the employees. And at some point they do have to learn it. I know it's hard. I know there's a lot of anxiety, but if this is something that you as the manager, it's that honest conversation that you have to have, which is, yes, this is hard. You do have anxiety. I have compassion. I have empathy, but we're also trying to do the best that we can, and we need to get through this, but we're going to get through this together.
Great, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then the last question that's come in, and then we'll wrap it up, is
Okay.
kind of looking
There's
to the
two in the
future.
chat I see too.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
the learning one is one we just answered. And
Okay.
then one that's looking kind of to the future. Now that many of us have become accustomed to working remotely, do you think companies are likely to adopt either mixed models of working remote or have more remote teams when the world kind of opens up again?
I do. I do. I think that prior to this, what I noticed in my work with employees is there was a lot of people that wanted to work remotely, but the organizations really weren't sure what that looked like, and they weren't sure how to make it happen. And in talking to people, what I found is, talking to managers and leaders, they've said, wow, people that, we've had to do this, and we've actually found that some people have been a lot less productive, and some people have just been a lot more productive. And it's finding what makes people flourish and what makes people succeed and finding best fit. And I think that now that people have been putting that into place and they're getting policies and they understand what remote work looks like, they're going to be more likely to have mixed models. Obviously, there's some people that have just, this remote work is not for them, and they've tried it, they don't like it, they can't wait to get back to an office. And then some people that have really enjoyed it and want that to be a more permanent thing. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more mixed model remote work environment. I think that especially because now this has kind of kicked off a lot more research in it, a lot more attention to the dynamics and certainly the resources, and speaking to the tools, the people that have offered remote work. I mean, Zoom's been around for a while. CLU has been using Zoom certainly for the past 18 months since I became an MBA student, and now suddenly everybody is using Zoom, and Zoom has had to strengthen up their offerings, which is great for them. But a lot of now other companies are strengthening up their remote tools and their support. And I think that we're going to see a real increase in tools and support for remote teams. So yeah, I definitely think that remote work is here to stay, and that this will definitely change the landscape of the office environment now.
Yes, yeah, I agree. So we'll wrap things up here. First of all, I want to thank you, Dr. Thayer, for taking the time this morning to present and share all this information with us. I hope everyone on the call found it useful and this time was informative. I want to just plug a couple of webinars next week that we have coming up that I hope you'll join us for. They're both on the screen. The first one is presented by Dr. Jamie Banker on Tuesday of next week. It's how to manage family relationships during this shelter-in-place time. The next one is next Thursday, a week from today, presented by biology professor Dr. Paloma Vargas. It's what you need to know and how you can protect yourself during COVID-19. So I hope you'll all be able to join us for those. Again, a huge thank you to Dr. Stacy Thayer for taking the time to present this morning. I hope everyone has a great rest of their week. Stay safe and stay healthy.
See.